Hi, Julie Jones from SSB Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training. Here's this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear. If you haven't checked out my son's Mindset Minutes, go to SSB Performance on YouTube and share them with kids. They're pretty good, I have to say, not just because he's mine, but he's having fun with it. This week we're talking about the foundations of peak performance and what my mentor taught me 30 years ago and again last week. So last Friday, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Susan Ziegler, who was our sports psychologist at Cleveland State when I was coaching there. And we got to interview her about the basics of mental performance on Game Changers Athlete Edition. Check it out, coming out not this Friday, but next Friday. It was awesome. It was inspiring. It was packed with simple, solid truths about performance, and it was awesome. If you've ever heard me talk about mental performance, I'm sure you've heard me talk about Dr. Ziegler and how she changed the athletes that I worked with and me as a coach, and even more importantly, me as a human being. So grateful for everything she did and continues to do for me. Her ability to take complex mental skills and make them simple is unmatched. She's the big reason that I do what I do today. Hook, line, and sinker got me to believe that mental performance changes everything. And while I thought I knew what she would say about the most important mental skill, she surprised me just a little bit, I have to admit. I often say that we're leaving a ton on the table because we don't use mental rehearsal or imagery nearly enough. So I said, hey, Sue, I said, don't you agree that mental rehearsal is the most important mental performance skill? And she replied with her wise, steady demeanor, agreeing with me in some ways, but holding the mirror up as always. She said yes, but she said, before you can use imagery effectively, you have to understand your habits and learn to manage your emotions. That's the foundation of all mental skills training. Manage your state. Power move number 3. And I'll take for her word for it. Always have, always will. And as I thought about how I teach mental skills and how we go through the process with the athletes and teams I work with, we do start with our superpower, which is self-awareness, and it's the beginning of all good science, asking questions, observing, asking questions, deciding what we're going to do with the information that we then gather. But sometimes I feel like I might rush through it. So Sue's take on mental training is this: before we can use any advanced mental skill, whether it's self-talk or mental rehearsal, imagery, whatever you want to call it, we have to understand ourselves and our habits first, our reactions, our stress patterns. That's where the control begins. As she talked, I was thinking about the 3 power moves and the framework that I use. And I think they line up well because they all point back to thinking about what our habits are in times of stress and in flow when things are going well. Once we recognize those habits, we can then change them or work to repeat the ones that help us. But here's the bottom line: we can't change what we don't recognize. It's tough to repeat the good stuff if we aren't aware what our thoughts, our responses, and our physiology are doing when we're our best, not just when we're not liking what we do. So as we work through these basics, Courtney, my co-host and former player, asked Sue, she said, what's too young to start learning to recognize our responses to stressors? And Sue answered this. She said, you can start teaching 2- and 3-year-olds to manage their breath, to manage themselves. And that's where it all begins. That's where it begins. For kids, for us, for surgeons, for professors, for doctors, for athletes. If we listen to her advice on how to help toddlers, we can understand the power that we have in ourselves as well. It's perfect. To put it simply, our breath is our gateway to control. She explains that in moments of stress, our first job is to regain control of the body, because the body leads the mind. And if you start with recognizing stress, then we're good to go. That's where it begins. She teaches the youngest kids to breathe deeply, to relax their muscles, to feel what calm feels like. One of her favorite ways to explain this to kids is perfect. It's so simple. It says, pretend that you're a strand of spaghetti that's not cooked. As you breathe in, you're all stiff. And then as you breathe out, you're cooked spaghetti. Think about what cooked spaghetti does. It's in flow. And it tastes good. But here's why our breath changes everything. Because when we slow down our breathing, we literally change how our brain functions. You know, I love Dr. Andrew Huberman and the Huberman Lab podcast. And his research at Stanford and all the things that he does, he talks a ton about the physiological side. We know he loves it. Breathing in again, and then exhaling. He loves it because it directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we want to calm ourselves down. It changes cortisol levels. It changes heart rates within seconds. And in Sue's words, when you take that deep breath, your world slows down. Not just your heart rate, everything. So that breath is the reset button for attention, emotion, and focus. It's the first step toward composure under pressure. And as Sue said, if you can't get your body under control and your mind under control, it's really hard to focus. Mental skills help us gain control and then help us focus in that order. It's the habit on which we build all other habits, that breath. So the basic foundational principle for mental skills is physically, emotionally, and attentionally getting the body under control so that we can perform. Once we recognize our habits, we can change them, we can adjust them, we can make them work for us. And we all have those default settings that happen when things get hard. Some of us sigh, some of us tense, some of us have negative self-talk, some of us shut down. But Sue's message is simple, is if we don't know what those things are, then they control us instead of us controlling them. It's noticing the tension, it's noticing the thought patterns, it's noticing our breath. It's our entry point to emotional control. Then, and only then, can we add on other tools like self-talk, mental rehearsal, imagery, and help them be exponentially more effective. But until the mind can slow down, until we can take a deep breath, it's hard to do anything else. From there, all these other things layer in beautifully. Because here's the deal, right? Breathing creates composure. Composure enables focus. Focus opens up the door to imagery and confidence and playing our best. That's the performance chain that Sue built her practice upon. It's the one that works from youth sports to the operating room. And she reminded us with stories from her former athletes and some of my former athletes, actually, some surgeons, some executives, that this is true. And she said she still even uses it as she volunteers at hospice for patients and for families. Unsurprisingly, since Sue was at the forefront of all this research with sports psychology back in the day, her philosophy aligns with decades of research on arousal and arousal regulation, emotional management as the foundation of performance. We've known since the early 1900s, since the inverted U, the Yerkes-Dodson introduced that long time ago, that performance improves with physical arousal up to a point after which it declines. So that's the curve. But that breath and awareness keeps athletes in the zone where they need to be, whether it's a 7, 8, or 9, or 10, wherever it is. And then in the 1990s, Hannon came in with the IZOF, the individual zone of function, that we know that each athlete has an individual zone in which they function best, and managing our emotions through our breath and our focus is the key to finding it. Right? And we know that emotional regulation research confirms that reappraisal and physiological control are the most effective ways to maintain performance under pressure. Finally, studies by Lair et al., a whole bunch of guys, right, on slow breathing biofeedback shows that improvements with slower breathing in attention, focus, and resilience, all those things. Our breath is our anchor. It not only keeps us alive, it helps us perform better, plain and simple. We ended our conversation with this. She said, don't underestimate the power of mental skills. Doing them doesn't mean we're weak. In fact, it's a strength. We're just building skills, not just for sport, but for life. It's the kind of wisdom that changes lives. So this week, whether you're coaching a team, managing a business, parenting a toddler, apparently, right? We should take Sue's advice. We just start with our breath. Recognize our stress. Notice our habits. That's the foundation to getting better. And as she says, be loose spaghetti. Then go be better. It's this simple. Notice your body. Where's your tension in your shoulders, your jaw, in your chest? Breathe. Breathe in again. Exhale long. Name your state. I'm tight, I'm rushed, or I feel That's what I like to say, right? I feel rushed, I feel tight, and then go straight to your new response, which is I choose to be calm. I choose to be focused. I don't have to. I'm not positive affirmationing myself into something. I choose. And we repeat this until we feel calm and back to focus again. It's training our brain, our mental game, the Sue Ziegler way, which to me is the best. So it's not about jumping in and learning every mental performance skill. It's learning the one that sets up the foundation for all others. How can you notice? How can you breathe to relax the things that you noticed? And then we can go on to watching ourselves be amazing, to using our highlight reels, to changing our self-talk. Because if we don't know what our self-talk is, how do we know if it's helping us or hurting us? How do we choose one thought over the other if we're not slowing down enough to take a look at it? All good points, all great stuff. So check out Game Changers Athlete Edition. It'll be out not this Friday, but next Friday. We'd love for you to listen and give us your feedback on Dr. Ziegler's words. And check out Jensen's Mindset Minutes at ssbperformance.com or SSB Performance on YouTube. He'd love for you to share those with young people that they'll help. Last week he talked about being a good teammate. All good stuff. All good stuff for kids. And we know that kids, maybe they'll take it better from a kid than they will for us. So that's what we're trying to do in this house, to help you, to help all of us be better at the mental game so we can be better at performing and be better at life. If you'd like to talk about this or anything about competing or peak performance, Julie J at ssbperformance.com. I love to work with your team. I love to come and do a workshop with your team. So much fun. Again, Julie J at ssbperformance.com. Until next week, have a great week. Or not. The choice is yours.